Thank you very much for that, Jonathan. I think before we start asking Jonathan, we also going to ask Maddy whether she's going to give us a response for additional things.
Should I come up there? Where's best?
Please do.
Yeah. Hi everyone. My name's Maddy. I'm from the organisation Waging Peace. We're a human rights NGO with its focus on Sudan. So I think we should mute him. Just wondering if we should mute him. So we're just focused on Sudan, and I'll explain just quickly a bit of our work, but I want to go on later. I've been asked to talk specifically about our work that we do with the community and with recently arrived Sudanese asylum seekers and refugees, which might be of interest to people in the room. But the bit of our work that's most relevant in terms of the chemical weapons report is our kind of campaigning, advocacy and lobbying side. So we were started in 2004 to lobby specifically on the Darfur issue by a lady called Becky Tinsley. And then we've sort of in the subsequent 12 years expanded our work to all of Sudan and made the decision in 2011 not to look at South Sudan. And we sort of do a range of activities, including engaging with the media on issues and with sort of key decision makers in Parliament and in Whitehall, and also helping run the Sudan Working Group, which is the major NGOs and humanitarian partners that work on Sudan, that was formerly convened by Crisis Action, which is the kind of big international advocacy group. They had to step back their work, so we kind of stepped in as the secretariat of that group. So we've sort of been responsible for kind of helping to coordinate messaging, hopefully, between the groups so that we're all on the same page. And I think I've been asked to speak today on chemical weapons because we sort of received the report around the same time as everyone else and decided that it would be a good activity for us to engage in to try and promote that quite widely to our networks. So I'll just briefly run through the sort of things that we've done and then maybe some of the issues that we came up against and that could be instructive for other times. So we were quite busy working on the chemical weapons issue. So that is our kind of usual, our usual range of activities we engage in, sort of engaging with the kind of senior civil servants on this, people like Chris Trott, the special representative, people in the Sudan unit, making sure that it was brought to their attention. Obviously, they're on all the right mailing lists, so it was. We organised a letter with more than 130 global co-signatories that went to, I think, the Human Rights Commissioner Prince Said, Ban Ki-moon, the sort of key decision makers, calling for the Human Rights Council to open a commission of inquiry on the model that was employed in Syria. We received quite, it would be interesting to get your views on this, we received quite differing reports about where to be placing pressure, whether it was in the Security Council itself, given that it's deadlocked on the issue of Sudan, or whether on the Human Rights Council. But actually the Human Rights Council had met when the report was released and chose not to raise it as an item of discussion, I think because there was so many internal divisions already between the African group and some of the Western governments there about how to deal with Sudan. So it wasn't even raised in that forum. So we received quite differing reports, and it'd be interesting to hear people's views on whether that focus was right. And we also sort of pursued a lot of media. So we did a lot of work with the UNAMID former spokesperson turned whistleblower Aisha El-Basri, sort of talking about her tenure and the rumours that she might have heard circulating while she was there. She did confirm that that was something that she had heard about during her tenure. I think obviously UNAMID does receive a lot of rumours, it's not like it can investigate everyone, but it clearly flew in the face of the later UNAMID statement saying that this was something that just had never been mentioned to anyone. It's a different time frame, but clearly these didn't have, these issues had a precedent, they've been discussed before. So I thought that was quite interesting. And then just briefly running through other things we did, we managed to get sort of MPs and Lords interested in signing a letter that then went into the Times, trying to raise it there. Other media, like sort of down to the kind of rag level of Daily Express, which weirdly picked up this issue and went on Sky News. And a lot of our activity has actually been supporting Amnesty's call for this investigation by the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. And just to sort of add to what Jonathan's been saying, I went to a meeting at which Jonathan spoke in Chatham House, and in the question and answer session, it seemed like there was this understanding that the OPCW would definitely always investigate this, and that actually it was Sudan that would obstruct it if they pushed for this investigation. Just to sort of say that obviously the OPCW has its own mechanisms, but we actually need to be quite active in calling for that investigation. Jonathan ran through it briefly, that we need to be pushing, you know, in our case, our UK government to be asking for clarifications, further clarifications in writing, and then for, I think, something called a challenge inspection. So just to not treat that as a kind of foregone conclusion that the OPCW does want to investigate, that's something that I think diaspora and community groups need to be calling for if they do feel that's the right approach to be making. And my understanding in the OPCW is that they, at the moment, obviously are investigating attacks in Syria, and I think there's a feeling that they don't want to dilute their focus on that country. I don't think it's a particularly well-resourced organisation, so there's been some reticence about whether they should be introducing another country focus at all, but that's just to give an understanding of their kind of dynamics on this. And I wanted to briefly touch on, I know that there's, you know, Jonathan very clearly delineated the parts of the report that were most picked up on with the chemical weapons, but then the kind of more sustained human rights abuses. And I think there's been some concern and debate in the advocacy community about whether the focus you know, on just chemical weapons in that part of the report was undue or misguided or likely to lead to problems down the line. And we obviously have seen it's led to certain issues to do with sort of peace negotiations. I mean, my kind of view on that is obviously that it would be great if we lived in a world where talking about those sustained human rights abuses actually yielded results and could produce news and could produce advocacy tools for us to be engaging new audiences. But you know, we certainly found it useful to have almost another pathway for advocacy. So now we've always been making approaches to UN bodies, to our own UK government. I mean, that's our focus, is engaging with the Foreign Office here. But this gave us this just additional route, which is now we can also be talking to the OPCW, our representative to that body, about pursuing another type of investigation. So, you know, I kind of recognise all the problems involved with undue focus on quite a small red line issue, but at the same time, I think that can actually be a benefit. And also, you know, part of our role at Waging Peace is to try and raise the profile of Sudan in the media. There wasn't a lot of media on this already, but it was one of the few issues recently that actually received any sort of media cut through at all. You know, the fact that it didn't achieve, you know, the levels that it would have done, I think, if new allegations had come out in Syria is already quite telling, but the fact that it was covered, it was something that could be covered at all, was quite helpful for us to be able to start those conversations with journalists in the first place. You know, we had a concrete piece of news that they could be reporting on, and you know, I speak to journalists all the time who just, you know, it's not news to say, unfortunately, that there is continued bombing, because it's literally not new for them. They already sort of know that and have no incentive to cover it. So we found it useful, and again, there are debates about this, but that comparison with Syria, sort of saying, this is what happened in the Syrian case when the accusations were made, albeit with sort of differing levels of evidence, and you know, that wasn't followed through on. And again, there are debates about whether it's useful to talk about Sudan in comparison to Syria to try and capture media attention, or whether that kind of dilutes looking at Sudan on its own terms, given that it's a completely different country situation that shouldn't, you know, necessarily be taken into those kind of wider debates. And just to sort of mention that you know, we're a UK-based organisation, we don't have operations on the ground or anything like that. Our audience is the UK public and UK decision makers. So we very much tried to tie the chemical weapons allegations and the human rights abuses to the recent UK-Sudan strategic dialogue and UK's engagement in the Khartoum process. Sort of trying to say, you know, we've raised our concerns with the Khartoum process and with that dialogue in a number of different channels, but it gave us another sort of more public-facing argument to say to them is this is the type of government which you are now deciding that you're going to increase your engagement level with. You know, is that a red line? Should it be a red line? It's all debatable. We can all have our own personal views, but it's important to kind of bring that to the attention of decision makers when it happens. Just a few other themes I wanted to pick out in terms of was UNAMID, which is, obviously the UNAMID statement on it was quite unhelpful in terms of our messaging, because it immediately sort of shuts down debate and media attention in particular. It's something that very quickly can be used by journalists to say, like, oh, but didn't UNAMID say, nothing had actually come of these allegations? And we saw that, more at the last notable case was in Tabit, where their statement on the mass rape there sort of shut down any kind of approaches we could make to media. It's obviously problematic when UNAMID does things like that. I think I've heard, again, this might be a rumour, is that statement wasn't actually filtered through the usual channels, that it didn't go to DPKO leadership, so that it wasn't seen by people in the Department for Peacekeeping Operations, and that it's actually caused quite a rift between those two functions, the country one and then the one in sort of New York. And there are all sorts of problems there. I would kind of repeat what Jonathan says about this protection role. That sort of has kept coming up in conversations we've been having, and I think kind of looking forward, if one of the Amnesty aims with their report was to talk about the investigation by the OPCW and the other is to look at sort of physical protection offered by UNAMID, I do think that other strand is also incredibly important. Hearing over and over again how much the just physical security provided by being in the proximity of a UNAMID team site provides to people on the ground. And just kind of a warning in a way that I do think coming into June and the mandate renewal date next year, I think we're going to see a lot more problems really with UNAMID and that mandate renewal. It's getting more and more difficult now that the tripartite committee on the exit strategy is sort of increasing its engagement, and especially given that we have a new Secretary General, I wouldn't really be surprised if arguments could be made that UNAMID, given its sort of second largest, second most well financed, is almost viewed as a kind of low hanging fruit. There's so many criticisms of it. I think there'll be discussions about revisions certainly, and I think we were quite lucky to escape that in this mandate renewal. But I definitely think in June next year it's going to be important. And then just because I was asked to talk about this very briefly as well, just in terms of our work. So all of this has sort of fallen under maybe what's more traditionally my role in Waging Peace. There's only 3 of us, we're a tiny organisation. But my other colleagues, and to some extent myself, do a lot of work with individual asylum seekers and refugees. And we kind of view that as very central to our campaigning and advocacy efforts as well. Involving their voices more than anything and trying to get their perspectives on things. But to sort of, to outline briefly what that work can look like, it's sort of very hands-on support in terms of, if somebody comes to us and they don't have a winter jacket, we might try and find them that, up to finding them legal representation, up to finding country experts, producing our own country evidence and reports in support of individual cases. And just to kind of end really on a comment, which is that we've definitely traditionally struggled with the difference in our work between those two sides, and I kind of see that replicated sometimes in the wider kind of advocacy community around Sudan, is that sometimes it's seen as very separate to have these kind of advocacy and political messages, and then to be engaging in that kind of direct support of the asylum seeking population here. And I think there is sometimes tensions almost between people who may have arrived from Sudan 2 decades ago, 3 decades ago, compared with those very recent arrivals, and understanding some of their concerns. And I do sometimes see kind of, maybe present company excluded, but certainly in other contexts, we've heard that it's, they're viewed as very different groups, and that actually bridging relationships between them has been a real challenge that, we're obviously in no position to, completely solve, but we'd like to help facilitate a space where that could be done. So, if anyone wanted to talk more about kind of support to asylum seeking and refugee populations, we're always happy to hear from people. But yeah, that was my kind of rambling perspectives on the report. But again, as well as Jonathan, I'm sure I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. But actually, I've just been told that a third speaker has arrived. I do not know. Abaker, it's nice to see you, and thanks for reminding me. Please come forward and let's hear your report before we start the question and answer session.
Good afternoon or good evening, I think. Thank you very much for inviting me for this very important session regarding the use of chemical weapons. So I have to thank Open Seams Group as well as Amnesty International and Wage in Peace for their comments and reports, very scientific one. I have to say in the beginning that I've been asked to give a brief historical event about the use of chemical weapons in Darfur pre this January 2016. But I think it's important just to say not only about the chemical weapons in Darfur, but also the rest of the Sudan, because there are other places also that are being used chemical weapons. One of the things first, let us know that the use of chemical weapons is, the purpose is not only to kill the biological kinds, or if you like, biological objects in mass, but also to distort the biological objects as well. So if you have not been killed, then your biological objects should be distorted, which is it is a real criminal case, an ethical problem. The applications was also which the symptoms which had been said previously with Jonathan, the one Jonathan film. Yeah, it is also in addition to that, it is yet the symptoms are not only about the reports, but also it is the pictures which has happened. I mean, you have seen it, and also the analysis of satellite images being analyzed. That all this shows without doubt that there are chemical weapons being used in Darfur. For me, so by the way, this pathological symptoms appears in various different areas in Sudan, and the symptoms also, in addition to what have been said, as I recorded, it includes high fever, vomiting, abdominal or back pains, yellowing of eyes, dermatology, spots on the skin, crunchy skin, nausea, vomiting of blood, abortion, darkness of skin, and a lot of these symptoms, which, according to the report of Medicine Sans Frontier, in 2000, they said that this kind of symptoms are not simply as a result of human diseases. It must be the result of chemical agents. So, which means because the government is denying that these are not the chemical symptoms. They didn't use any chemical weapons, but it seems that they are still, whatever they deny, that they didn't use chemical weapons. The scientific analysis or all kinds used shows that the use of chemicals. The point is not only the use of chemical weapons. This government in particular, the National Congress Party, in addition to use of chemical weapons, they also launched about 7 wars since they came to power. One of the wars they, reactivated, which is the one in South, but they initiated other wars in Darfur, in South Kordofan, in Southern Blue Nile, in Eastern Sudan, in Kajibar areas of North Sudan, in Khartoum itself, and these wars, in addition to chemical weapons use, to me it shows that, and these are all against civilians, not against organized or well-armed armies. It is against civilians, and which means this kind of government, it is well qualified to call it is a government of moral crisis. This is a government of moral crisis. So the only thing is that in order for us, because according to these areas of wars, civil wars, in order to die slowly, it is now our turn as a Sudanese to get rid of it. Otherwise, we will be dead, all of us, gradually. So, furthermore, regarding the report to prove that the chemical weapons has been used, as said also earlier, according to a report of MSF in 2000, the United Nations itself has withdrawn its personnel from South, in particularly in the Yei area, because in 23rd of July 1999, the government has bombed that area in Yei locality, at least 2 villages, and 2 of World Food Program officers have been affected by nausea, vomiting, and losing of balance injuries. So they said, the United Nations said it is a dangerous area for a staff to be working there. That's why they withdraw their staff from Yei. That means still these allegations are true since 2000 up to now, at least which we can record. So I have here, just I will let you know about 6 or 7 areas where historically, at least as far as I know, the weapons, the chemical weapon has been used. One is in 1999, which, as I said, just recently in Yei locality, in South Sudan, West Equatoria. In 2001, also in, and this is for individuals, there was a manager or director of a Nema bank. This man has been injected with various substance in order to enforce him to talk about the things they are just dictating him, and also to act according to, against his will. This happens in Khartoum, which means this kind of injection also is the kind of those which are against the, prohibited by international law. In 2003, some villages in Wadi Saleh, which is southwest Darfur, has been by air bombarded with barrels. Those barrels are containing some substance which include chemicals. What happens is that so many people being died, not only people being died or all the biological objects being died as well, but also the rocks in that areas has changed to lava, red lava, which means it's something it's not normal at all. That one of the things is that the people of local indigenous in that area are all now at the moment all of them are displaced into IDP camps. In 2004, also there's the Hafir, which is we call it the Hafir, which is seasonal water bore.
Reservoir.
Yeah, water bore is seasonal one, and people used to watering there as well as their cattle. They drop 2 barrels just in the middle of that water bore, and then the contaminated water caused death of some people, but a huge number of camels, donkeys, as well as cattle. And in that one, at the time, we were being negotiating in Abuja as the government. And we in SPLM, as well as jointly with GEM, we report to the African Union, in fact, to the ceasefire, which is a part of one of the agents of African Union. And then they investigate. And then they report to headquarters in Addis, but that report has been dead since then. Nobody take care of it. We don't know up to now what happened to that report. It was not there. Again, in 2004, early 2004, government has deployed a lot of police personnel from Khartoum to Fashir because they thought at that time it is area, so it is only police can just combat the movements. What happens is that in outskirts of Fashir, they drop some chemical weapons, but it backfired to them. It seems to me that there was newly, they are not quite familiar with the use of this thing, because it's just something new. Anyway, those who were in the front line have caught this diarrhea, vomiting, and taken them to police hospital in Khartoum. Many of them, less than 10, anyway, they did. Others, which were a bit far from there, they have been treated with, regarding the chemical weapons symptoms. In 2007, there was a tribal war between Rezegat Abala, they are camel herders, and Tarjam, which are cattle herders in South Darfur, in locality of Kas. those who came from government side, they were militias, they called at that time, before they now are calling rapid forces. Before it was, they got given the name of, not Janjaweed, Haras al-Hudud, that is Borders Guard. Majority of them are actually from Abara and Maharia. Majority of them from Abara and Maharia. So they came and they used chemical weapons against Tarjam in Yemen. At the time, the governor of South Darfur was Atal Mannan. And relatives of dead bodies of Tarjam, they refused because they have seen some symptoms in their relatives, which is not an unusual one. They refused to take over the burial of their relatives. So Atal Mannan and his crew his officers has been enforced to take the process of burying these people. They've been buried in just outside Texas, which is south of Niara. That was in 2007. In 2013, in Katila town, which is also one of South Darfur, there was an attack by government to that area. 3 children were killed, their age between 11 to 12 years old. But there was a great number of people who have been, they call these symptoms of high fever, vomiting, back and abdominal pains, yellowing of their eyes, within great number of the people of Katila. Now, one of these, as a result of this Amnesty International report, I just realized that some of many Sudanese, especially those who are from these war areas, start recalling that there are some symptoms like this happens to them earlier as well. They don't know exactly what. But now people from Nuba Mountain in particular, there's activists who start collecting some information, asking their people on the ground to remember as much as they can what happens, this symptom, if they are claiming that such symptoms has happened to them, to record and report these things. That means it's, again, it's proving that this chemical weapons has been used in Sudan, in different areas of the country. To me, it is not only chemical use, weapons. Also, recently there was a report, especially I got it, the audio one, which is says that the burial of this of chemicals and not chemicals. I mean
Waste.
Waste in western Nile, in the northern rivers. And this now start showing that there are many people who start claiming that they got some disease and then they went to Egypt. Many of them, they went to Egypt, they discovered that it's a cancer. And this is the waste of chemicals being buried in, even long before Al-Bashir came to power as well. It was even during Nimeris, but still during Bashir's time also there are this waste radiator wells being barriers there. So it is that, again, we will say that these government are government of moral crisis, actually. They don't have any moralities in that towards the people of the, as if they want that all the Sudanese, yes, will be dead and they remain armed themselves in order to rule themselves only. So that is what I said. I mean, I got it from the records as far as I know about this. Now, I would like to conclude this. As we see, this is the situation. Now the question is this: are we going, as a Sudanese, are we going to help ourselves in order to others? In order to others to help us more, or what are we going to do? This is so for me. It seems that our responsibility is that we have to get together, because now these are not discriminating. It's not discriminating anyone. They are not discriminating anybody. This government, all of us, we are in the same objects. They are targeting us all, whether it is direct wars or with chemical weapons or whatever it is. One of the things I am thinking is that let us do one thing as for us as in diaspora. Let us activate civil activities, organize as much as possible, collect millions of signatures to petitions, help them, because they will find a way that also, okay, these NGOs, foreign NGOs, they will see, okay, these people are also, they are really desperate, we can help them. Let us go and do that, one of the things. The other thing also, we have to carry on also demonstrating, because this way we will find, even if we are going for holidays in Sudan, we will find that we don't have any relatives there to visit. Yes. So the best thing is that let us help ourselves first, I think. Let us forget about our differences, that we have only one thing we have in common: we have to live. Otherwise, if we're not thinking that we are going to live, or if we are thinking that I will live but the other will die, then we are not going anywhere. So that's what I want to conclude, and thank you very much for listening.